cleared my parents' $287,000 mortgage as an anniversary gift. When I showed up to surprise them, my mother was sitting in her own kitchen like a guest, and my brother-in-law was at the head of the table like he owned the place, because in his mind, he already did. My name is June. I'm 32 years old, a physical therapist, the oldest of two kids, and for as long as I can remember, the one who figured things out. Not because I was asked to, because someone had to. I grew up in a small house in Akron, Ohio. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen where the linoleum peeled up at the corner near the dishwasher, and my dad kept meaning to fix it and never did. We weren't poor in the way people picture poverty. We always had food. The lights stayed on most of the time, but there was a specific kind of fear that lived in our house, a low hum of it, constant, like the refrigerator running. It lived in the way my mom would go quiet on the first of the month, in the way my dad would take extra shifts without being asked and come home gray and silent, in the stack of envelopes my mom kept in the second kitchen drawer, the one that stuck, the one nobody was supposed to open but me. I was 10 years old the first time I understood what a second mortgage was, not because anyone explained it to me, because I found the paperwork. My dad, Walter, worked 31 years at a machine parts warehouse. Good man, quiet man, the kind of man who showed up. He had a handshake you could feel in your whole arm, and a laugh that surprised you every time because it was bigger than he looked. But money was not his language. Numbers scared him. So my mom, Gloria, handled the finances, which meant she handled the fear. She was the one who knew exactly how much was in the account at any given moment, and exactly how much was needed, and exactly how much was needed, and exactly how much was missing. She carried that weight like it was stitched into her shoulders. I saw it in the way she stood sometimes, at the sink, her hands in the water, just staring out the window at the backyard, not seeing anything, just surviving the moment. My younger sister Nora was different. Nora felt everything loudly. She cried when she didn't get what she wanted and laughed when she did. And somehow the world rearranged itself around her feelings. I don't say that with bitterness, it's just the truth. She was 2 years younger than me, and she had learned very early that volume worked. I remember my 13th birthday. I had asked for one thing, a specific book set, the kind that came in a slipcase, a fantasy series I'd been reading at the library. It cost $40. I knew that was a lot. I had done the math. I had asked anyway, quietly, once, and let it go. The weekend before my birthday, Nora decided she needed new cleats for soccer, the ones all the girls on her team had. She cried about it for 2 days. My parents caved. The cleats cost $65. On my birthday, I got a card and a box of chocolates from the drugstore. My mom squeezed my hand and said, "You know how she is? You're the strong one." I nodded. I understood. I always understood. I always understood was that my needs had a ceiling and Nora's didn't. Not because they loved her more. Because she made it harder to say no, and I made it easy. So I studied. I worked. I got a full scholarship to Ohio State, put myself through a PT program, graduated with almost no debt because I had 2 jobs the whole time, and shared an apartment with 3 other people and ate a lot of frozen rice and canned soup. I built a life that didn't wobble. That was the whole point. Stability like oxygen. My parents were still in Akron when I moved to Columbus for work. Same house. Still paying off that second mortgage. My dad's knees were bad now, 20 years of concrete floors. My mom had developed a low-grade anxiety that had calcified into just the way she was. They were in their mid-60s and still waking up worried about money. I visited on a Sunday in February, 8 months before their 40th anniversary. My mom had a stack of medical bills on the kitchen table and was sorting them in a way that made my chest hurt, moving the urgent ones to the front, the ones she could delay toward the back, like she was playing a card game she couldn't win. "Mom, what are these?" "Oh, it's nothing," she said. "Your father's knee. The insurance only covered part of it." I looked at the total. It was $4,000. I looked at her face. That night I drove home and I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and I looked at their mortgage. I had their banking login from a few years back when I helped them refinance. I checked the balance, $287,000. 30 more years if they kept paying as they were. My father would be 94 years old when the house was paid off, if everything went exactly as planned. I had been saving for a long time. My own place, someday. A house with a yard and a room I could paint whatever color I wanted. But I looked at that number, and then I looked at a photo on my phone of my mom at the kitchen table sorting those envelopes, and I made a decision. I called my financial advisor the next morning. Her name was Teresa. She talked me through the process, the taxes, the logistics. It took 6 months to arrange. I liquidated savings. I made some hard calls. I kept working extra shifts and taking on weekend patients. But I did it. On a Thursday in August, I wired the payoff amount directly to their mortgage servicer. The house was clear. I planned to tell them on their anniversary, October 14th. 40 years. I wanted to do it right. I bought a frame, printed the payoff confirmation letter, put it in a card with a ribbon. I also paid off my dad's knee surgery balance and put 3 years of property taxes on auto pay from an account I controlled. I didn't want them to have to do anything except breathe. I was happy the whole drive to Akron. I had the card in my passenger seat. I'd brought a pie from a bakery they liked. The sky was that particular October blue, the kind that makes everything look clean. I turned onto their street. There was a truck in the driveway I didn't recognize. A big black pickup with a dent in the passenger door and a cracked taillight. I parked on the street. I grabbed the pie. I knocked. My mother answered. She was wearing her house clothes, the soft pants and the cardigan she kept for being home. But her face was wrong. She smiled when she saw me, that automatic mom smile, but her eyes were off. June, I wasn't expecting you until later. I told you I'd be here at noon, Mom. Mom? Yes? Yes, come in. I stepped inside. The house smelled like cigarettes. My parents didn't smoke. My father was in the living room in his recliner, which was right, but his posture was wrong. He was sitting stiffly, like someone had told him to sit there. He looked up when I came in, and something moved in his face that I couldn't name. Relief, maybe, or warning. My brother-in-law, Scott, was at the kitchen table. He had a beer open. It was 12:15 in the afternoon. He was on his phone with his feet up on the chair my father usually used to put his bad knee up. He looked up when I walked through and said, "Hey," without moving. Nora came out of the hallway. She was in sweats, her hair up, carrying my nephew Owen, who was 4, on her hip. She smiled at me with her whole face. "June! Oh my God, it's so good to see you!" We drove up last night. It was such a spontaneous thing. The kids have been dying to see Grandma and Grandpa. And honestly, we just needed to get out of the house. You know how it is. I looked around. My niece, Avery, who was 7, was watching something on a tablet on the couch. Scott had not moved. My mom was already back at the sink doing something with her hands, her back to the room. I looked at my dad. He looked at his knee. I put the pie down on the counter. I had known, even before I knew, the moment I saw the truck. Some part of me had already understood what this was. Because I knew Nora. I knew that spontaneous didn't mean what she said it meant. I knew that we just needed to get out of the house was information dressed up as explanation. Scott had been between jobs, which was his natural state, for about 8 months. Nora did some kind of social media consulting that she explained differently every time I asked. They lived in a rental in Cincinnati that I had, twice in the last 3 years, quietly helped cover when things were tight. I said I'd help with 1 month, just to get them through. Both times it became 2 months. I'd told myself it was for the kids, but standing in my parents' kitchen at noon on their anniversary, watching Scott drink my dad's beer with his feet up, something in my chest went very still. I asked my mom to take a walk with me. We went around the block. October cold. She pulled her cardigan tighter. Mom, what's going on? She told me in that voice she had, the small, careful one. Nora had called Thursday night. Scott was having a hard time with his current job search. The apartment was stressful. They just needed a few days a week maybe just to decompress. The kids loved being here. I asked when they were planning to leave. My mom looked at the sidewalk. She didn't answer. How long have you been planning this, Mom? She looked at the sidewalk. I've been planning this day for 8 months, I said. I have something to tell you and Dad tonight. I need you to understand that what I'm about to say is something I did for you, not for Nora, not for Scott. She stopped walking. She looked at me. I told her the house was paid off, all of it. The mortgage was gone. The knee surgery bills were gone. 3 years of property taxes set. She stood in the middle of the sidewalk with her mouth open and her eyes filling. Oh, June, I know. How did you? It doesn't matter how. It's done. It's yours. She put her hands over her mouth. Now tell me how long Nora and Scott are planning to stay. She was quiet for a long time. A month, she finally whispered. Scott found an apartment listing in Findlay. It's cheaper. He wants to get out of Cincinnati. They're going to use here as a base while they look. A month, she wouldn't look at me. A month in my parents' house. My parents' paid-off house. The one I just handed them, free and clear. I thought about Scott's beer at noon. His feet on my dad's chair. The cigarette smell. I didn't say anything on the walk back. I was doing math. Not the financial kind. I had paid off their house. That was done, and it was a gift, regardless of whatever happened next, and I had no intention of taking it back. But I had also, by doing it, handed Nora and Scott a free landing pad. Not on purpose, but that didn't matter. I thought about all the times I'd said yes to Nora. The lease gap payments. The time Scott needed new work clothes for a job interview he didn't get. The time Nora cried on the phone at 11 p.m. because they bounced their car payment and asked me not to tell anyone. I had said yes every time. And every time I said yes, every time. And every time I said yes, nothing changed. They never landed. They just bounced off me and kept going. What I had done for my parents was not a resource. It was not a rest stop. It was peace. It was 40 years of fear paid off and canceled and finished. That was what I had bought, and I was not going to watch it turned into a free apartment for 2 adults who had never once asked what they could do for my parents, only what my parents could do for them. I went back inside. My dad looked up. Come sit with me, I said. I want to tell you both something. Nora was in the kitchen by then, making coffee. Scott had not moved. I sat on the arm of the sofa across from my dad's chair. My mom sat down beside him. I took out the card. Your anniversary is today, I said. I want you to open this. My dad looked at it the way he looked at envelopes. Carefully, like it might change. He opened it. He looked at the paper inside. He read it. He read it again. What is this, Junebug? It's the payoff confirmation, Dad. Your mortgage. It's done. He looked at the paper. He looked at my mom. He looked at me. Don't mess with me. I'm not. He sat there for a long time not talking. My mom was already crying, the quiet kind, her hands clasped in her lap. My dad set the paper down on the armrest very carefully, like it was fragile, and rubbed his face with both hands. From the kitchen, I heard Nora go still. The coffee maker kept going. Scott said, "Huh," loud enough that he meant for us to hear it. I looked over. He was leaning back in the chair, one eyebrow up. That's generous, he said. He said it the way people say it when they mean something else. It's for my parents, I said. Sure, he said. Family, though, right? Good news for everyone. There it was. Nora came out of the kitchen wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her face was doing something complicated. She was smiling, but her eyes were working fast, calculating. June, this is incredible, she said. She hugged me. She hugged me with real warmth. the kind that scared me more than coldness. Mom, Dad, isn't this amazing? She's so amazing. It is amazing, said Scott, standing up and stretching, still on his phone. Hey, Walter, he said to my dad, have you thought about what you want to do with the equity? Because there's actually some real opportunity there if you... No, I said. Scott looked at me. There's no equity conversation. The house isn't an asset to be leveraged. It's their home. It stays that way. I was just saying. I know what you were saying. Nora laughed, that bright, deflecting laugh. Okay, let's not do this. Today's supposed to be happy. It is happy. Right, Mom? My mom was looking at her hands. I looked at my dad. He was watching Scott. And for the first time in my life, I saw something on my father's face that wasn't patience or exhaustion. It was something closer to anger. Quiet anger. The kind that has been waiting a long time. He said, Scott. Scott looked at him. Sit down. Something in my dad's voice made Scott sit. My dad looked at Nora. I need you to tell me something true, he said. How long were you planning to stay? Nora opened her mouth. True, he said again. His voice was not loud. It was just very solid. She closed her mouth. A second went by. A month, she said, finally. Maybe a little more, while we look for an apartment in Finley. It's just more practical. And the kids, and you were going to mention this, Len? Exactly. She looked at the floor. My mom stood up from the armchair, very slowly, like her joints hurt. She went to the kitchen and got herself a glass of water and stood at the window over the sink. The same window she'd stood at my whole childhood, surviving moments. I went and stood next to her. I said it quietly. You don't have to let them stay. She said nothing. Mom, this house is yours, not a favor you owe anyone. Yours. She took a long drink of water. Nora came to the kitchen doorway. Mom, you know I'd do the same for you. I looked at my sister. You've never done anything for them, I said. Not because you're cruel. Because it never occurred to you to try. That's not fair. It's completely fair. Her eyes went wet. You think you're better than me because you have more money? No, I said. I think I'm more honest than you about what I take and what I give. The room was quiet. Scott started to say something from the living room. My dad said, Scott, that's enough. Another silence. Longer this time. My mom set her glass down. She turned around and faced the room. She looked at Nora. She looked at Scott. She looked at her hands. Then she looked at me. She said, I want my house back. 6 words. Her voice was the smallest I'd ever heard it and also the firmest. Nora stared at her. Mom, I mean it, my mom said. I want you to go. I want a week of quiet in my own home. In my house that June paid for. I have earned that. Nora looked at my dad. He nodded once. Nora looked at Scott. Scott looked at the floor. It took 2 hours. 2 hours of packing and loading the truck, and Avery crying because she wanted to stay, and Owen asking for juice 3 times in a row, and Scott carrying the cooler out like he was personally offended by it. Nora hugged my mom at the door, and my mom hugged her back and held on a beat too long, the way you hold someone when you love them, but you've made a decision. When the truck pulled out of the driveway, my dad stood on the porch and watched it go. He didn't wave. I stood next to him. He said, I should have done that myself. Yeah, I said. He was quiet. You did it when it mattered, I said. Just now, that was you. He shook his head a little. I let it go on too long. We both had, I thought. That was the honest answer. We had both been practicing a version of love that looked like patience but was actually avoidance. We had watched Nora learn that there were no real consequences, and we had taught her that together without meaning to. I had paid off her emergencies, and my parents had opened their door, and none of it had ever cost her anything, so she had kept asking. That part was done. Inside, my mom was already moving through the house with a quiet energy I hadn't seen before. She opened the windows. October air came in sharp and cold and smelling like leaves. She found the ashtray Scott had left on the back porch and threw it in the trash without ceremony. She ran a load of laundry. She moved the kitchen chairs back to where they belonged. Then she sat down at the table with a notepad and started writing something. "What are you doing?" "Making a list," she said. "Things I want to do with the house." She had written 3 things already. Paint the dining room, a real color, not beige. Get a new welcome mat. Take a cooking class, something from scratch. I sat down across from her. She looked up. "I keep waiting to feel bad," she said, "about asking them to leave." "Do you?" She thought about it. "No," she said. "That's the strange part. I don't." "Good." She looked back at her notepad. "I wasted a lot of years being afraid of my own feelings," she said. "I know." She tapped her pen on the table. "I didn't want you to grow up like that. I don't know when you to grow up like that. I don't know when you did anyway." "I grew up like it because I loved you," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she wrote a 4th thing on her list. She turned the pad around so I could see it. It said, "Thank June." I laughed. She laughed. My dad came in from the porch and looked at us and said, "What's funny?" And my mom said nothing, just laughing. And he said, "Okay then," and put the kettle on. That night we had pie at the kitchen table. The 3 of us. The linoleum in the corner was still peeling. My dad said he was going to fix it now. Finally, he had time. He wasn't tired in the same way anymore. My mom said she'd believe it when she saw it. He said, "Watch me." They argued about it the way people argue when they're not really arguing about anything, just making noise together because they can. It was 10 o'clock at night and the dishes were done and the house was quiet. My mom put her hand on top of mine on the table. She said, "I slept through the night for the first time in years, the morning after you called Teresa, before I even knew what you'd done." Something had already shifted. She shook her head. I couldn't explain it. "You felt safe," I said. She nodded. My dad looked at the ceiling. "I feel like I can breathe," he said. "First time in I don't know how long." Not pretending. Actually breathing. Nora called me 3 times in the 2 weeks after. First angry, then apologetic, then asking about timing, whether maybe after the holidays they could come back for just a few days. Just the kids, just to give the kids some stability. I didn't answer. My mom answered the last call. I don't know exactly what she said, but when I called her that evening she sounded different, lighter. She said, "I told her we'd be happy to see the grandchildren in the spring, when we've had some time, when we're ready." I said that sounded right. She said, "June, I should have done this a long time ago." We both knew that was true. We both also knew it didn't matter anymore. The only time that exists is the one you're in. My parents' house is paid off. My mom painted the dining room a blue-green color that shouldn't work but does. My dad fixed the linoleum in the kitchen. Took him one Saturday morning. Said it was easier than he expected. He sends me a photo of the ocean when he wakes up early, a calendar he got, a different beach every month. He says he's training himself to want less and feel more. I drove up last month on a Saturday, no reason. I sat in my car for a minute before I went in. Through the front window, I could see the light on over the kitchen table. My mom was reading. My dad's feet were up on the footstool he'd had for 20 years. The house was just a house in Akron with peeling linoleum and a fixed corner and a dining room that's the wrong shade of blue for everyone except my mother, but it was theirs, all the way down. There are people who will tell you that you can't choose your family, that blood is blood, that you have to keep showing up no matter what. I am not saying those people are wrong for their own lives. I'm saying I stopped letting that sentence be used as a key that anyone could use to unlock me whenever they needed something. Love is not the same as being available. Generosity is not the same as saying yes. And peace, real peace, is not something you can give someone if you don't also teach them and yourself how to hold the door closed. If any of this sounds like your life, you already know what I mean. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you want to hear the rest. The thing I keep coming back to is the linoleum. That peeling corner in the kitchen my dad always said he'd fix and never did. He fixed it on a Saturday morning 2 weeks after Nora and Scott left. Said it took him less than an hour. Said he didn't know why he'd waited so long. I think I know why he'd waited so long. I think I know why. When you're surviving, you don't fix things. You just get through the day and tell yourself you'll deal with it later when there's more time, more money, more energy. Later becomes a habit. The house holds the shape of all the years you couldn't afford to stop and take care of it. What I did for my parents wasn't just pay off a mortgage, I gave them later. I gave them Saturday mornings where the worst thing on the to-do list was a loose corner of flooring. But here's what I had to reckon with, honestly. And I mean really sit with it. I had been part of the problem. Not in the same way Nora was, but every time I wired her money without a real conversation, every time I smoothed over an emergency so nobody had to feel the full weight of it, I was teaching everyone in my family that actions didn't stick, that there was always a floor beneath the floor. Me. I was the floor. And a floor that never lets you fall also never lets you learn to stand. What changed for me, somewhere around 30, was the difference between being good and being smart about being good. I had the first part down. I worked hard, I showed up, I gave when I could. But I wasn't thinking clearly about where it went or what it built. Generosity without judgment isn't generosity, it's just relief. You do it because the discomfort of saying no feels worse than the cost of saying yes. That's not virtue. That's avoidance with a generous face on it. My mom standing at the sink that October afternoon, gripping a dish towel, not even turning around when I walked in. That image did something to me. She had spent 40 years managing the fear in that house, sorting envelopes, reading faces, making herself small so other people could stay comfortable, and the cruelest part was that nobody had forced her into it. She had chosen it so many times it stopped feeling like a choice. It just became who she was. Watching her turn around and say, "I want my house back," 6 words, quiet voice, no drama, that was the bravest thing I saw in that whole situation. Not what I did, what she did. Because I had the distance of someone who'd built a separate life. She had to say it to her own daughter, in her own kitchen at 64 years old, after a lifetime of yes. That takes something that can't be bought or borrowed. It takes the kind of honesty that hurts before it helps. The kind of spine that doesn't come from never being knocked down, but from getting knocked down enough times that you finally decide the floor isn't where you live. I'm still learning that too. I think most of us are. If you love someone the way I loved my parents, completely, quietly, at a cost, you already know that love is not the same as endless availability. Real care sometimes looks like a closed door. Real support sometimes sounds like no. And the life you protect, when you finally draw that line, might just be yours as much as theirs.